Although we don't always see it, just down the road someone is alive because the Haven was there to help. In your community, the Haven helped someone work hard, see a future, and achieve self-sufficiency.
No one should have to experience domestic violence or be forced to leave their home because it's not safe. Tri-Valley Haven is committed to peaceful families, peaceful communities, and the organization started to work against domestic violence, then sexual assault, then homelessness and poverty. It all ties together from the mission statement of peace, really, and safe homes, safe families. Everything flowed from there. So we went from a garage, truly grassroots work, from a garage in a board member's house to the $2 million organization, multifaceted program that we are today.
Domestic Violence Services is a program that encompasses our 24-hour crisis hotline for domestic violence and sexual assault, a 30-bed domestic violence safe house that serves women and children who are fleeing violent situations, and a legal clinic that assists survivors in getting temporary restraining orders. One family that I worked with very early on in my time here with the Haven, Mom was a survivor of DV. She had been horribly assaulted, and her 5-year-old son found her like that and sat with her waiting for the police to arrive in the ambulance. And they came into the shelter, and just in the course of a casual conversation with him, I asked him, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he said, I want to be a police officer. And he said, so I can arrest my dad. And when I think about that, and I think about how we have this opportunity to really work with people and to really affect change and help break a cycle, it drives home to me why this work is so important.
People can get housing for up to 2 years. Now that's critical because it helps families who have experienced violence set new traditions. And 2 years, I know, seems like a very long time, but when you think about it, getting a job is easy because it's the front end. You can help anybody be okay for a 15-minute interview. But what do they do 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years after that? So the longer term allows this family to set new traditions, Thanksgiving dinner without any violence.
And both our shelter programs have a life skill focus, which means when our participants come in, we want to help them develop the skill set so that when they leave our program, they can move forward in a way that is healthy, violence-free, really being able to nurture themselves and their families. The dining table at Sojourner House is huge. It takes up the whole room, and it has 16 chairs because we have 16 beds. And when we reopened the shelter, we wanted to really emphasize the family nature of the program. And so we wanted to have a table that would seat every person who lived here, and it does. And Thanksgiving, people sit down and eat dinner together. Christmas, people sit down and eat dinner together. Mother's Day, the whole 9 yards. It's, I think, a real symbol of what we're trying to accomplish within our homeless program, and that's, mending fences, bringing families together, supporting healthy family activities as simple as sharing a meal together. I've always been very interested in the anti-violence movement and the Haven and its approach to the work, in that they look not only at domestic violence but violence as a whole, and really working towards the cultural change that needs to happen to really eliminate violence. We have an amazing team of staff and volunteers that do the most beautiful work under the darkest of circumstances, and that they come in every day and they're energized and they want to do this work and they want to be of service, and even when it's hard or uncomfortable or heartbreakingly sad, they do it, and they do it with grace, and they put themselves aside and whatever it is that they're struggling with, and are able to be there just 100% for that person who needs them. And to me, that's amazing.
I worked with a battered woman several years ago, and she had been left for dead. He had run her over with a car. She'd had 8 surgeries. And she said that even through the horrible physical violence, some of which was the worst I'd ever heard about, the verbal and the psychological abuse was so much worse. That this was a woman who almost died more than once, and said that it was the verbal and psychological abuse that almost killed her. And when she finally got help and saved her life, she decided that's what she wanted to do with women, is very literally help them save their own lives and that of their children. When it comes to family violence and sexual assault, that's never known any income lines or separations. Nobody's immune to domestic violence. A woman in $1 million bracket might suffer the same abuse as a woman who's on welfare. There are no boundaries for domestic violence. Every color, every dollar, every neighborhood will have it.
After a sexual assault or a rape, somebody can be so sort of frozen by fear that those everyday things that you and I take for granted, walking to your car, going to the store, taking, a walk after dinner, are things that, really seem like they'll never be able to do again. And there's this incredible feeling that I'm alone, that nobody understands what it's like to be a sexual assault survivor. And am I ever going to feel like I felt before this happened? And something that we also offer is group therapy. And that can be very healing, because it's very healing to be in a group where people really not only understand, but have been through the same thing. And they may be, a year ahead of me in their healing process. And that gives a lot of hope to a survivor. And I, as a survivor, might be able to help somebody who has just come into that group. So that kind of camaraderie and that kind of therapy is also something that we offer in addition to individual counseling. And many people come, right after they've been sexually assaulted. Some people come 6 months later. Some people come 3 years later. But whenever they're ready for counseling, we have somebody there who's ready to meet with them, who's ready to talk about the event. And studies show that people who can talk about their trauma in a supportive environment, that those post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms are really alleviated by quite a bit. We all want to feel safe. We all want to believe that something like sexual violence will not happen in our own town. And I would like nothing more than to eradicate all sexual violence. But unfortunately, at this point, statistics tell us that 1 in 3 to 1 in 4 women in her lifetime will be sexually assaulted. Now, the average person, the average age is 16 to 19 years old. And it usually happens between 3 and 6 in the afternoon, and that's because a lot of parents aren't home. And acquaintance rape is the most common type of sexual violence. The Tri-Valley Haven Rape Crisis Center provides sexual assault advocates anytime somebody in the Tri-Valley is sexually assaulted. So if a survivor of sexual violence goes to the police station, or if the survivor of sexual violence goes to the hospital, the police or the hospital staff will call us 24 hours a day, 3 in the morning. We'll send a trained, certified by the Office of Emergency Services advocate out there to be there specifically for that survivor, to explain the process of the investigation, the process of the forensic exam, the process of the court procedure, how to get victim compensation, and just to be there specifically for that person, for whatever they need. The Rape Crisis Center provides crisis counseling. If somebody comes in, if they were sexually assaulted yesterday, or if they were sexually assaulted 30 years ago, anybody can come in for crisis counseling.
The restraining order clinic that Tri-Valley Haven offers is very important, because oftentimes the only protection a person has is the protection that the courts provide. The good outcomes are when someone uses the restraining order process to protect themselves and then actually goes on to restart their life without the abuser. They take advantage of the help that's available to them from the community and from Tri-Valley Haven, and they start life over again without this problem in their life. The Tri-Valley Haven mission reads something like creating homes free from violence, one person, one family, one community at a time. That's what keeps me going, is the idea of somehow making this a better world, somehow helping people that can't do it for themselves. A big one is the fact that I really dislike bullies, and so often in these DV relationships, it's a bully problem, and I feel great helping that person who needs the assistance to stand up to the bully and say enough is enough. And so that's how the mission plays out in my work.
It affects the children maybe even worse in some ways because they are so powerless. They have nightmares. They don't do well in school. And this is a time of development for them. This is a critical time for them. And when they're scared or when they're trying to protect their mother, they're not thriving. They're coping at best. And you'd be surprised at some of the tough kids we see come in our shelter. It's heartbreaking, but you're seeing that they're a survivor. They've developed some coping skills. We just need to maybe redirect those skills and help them be a child again instead of an adult who's trying to protect their mom. We've enhanced our children's services. We took part in a research project and found that the longer children stayed with us, the better they did. Kids would sleep through the night. They'd have less fights at school. They would do better at school. They would be able to make friends. We're very proud of that our children's services are able to help kids. We often see that that's the first time a child will sleep through the night because he knows his mom is safe.
You know, from a community perspective, a lot of times I think people don't recognize how kids are affected and, and why kids would want to be involved in a domestic violence situation and why they would intervene. So I think a lot of times we neglect that part of the exposure and what that can do to kids. So I think, obviously coming from a children's perspective, that's really important to me, that people understand how kids are involved and at the same time know a lot about their resiliency. I mean, kids are much better than all of us as adults. They really can get over a lot of things that we cannot sometimes. And so I work in the domestic violence shelter and the homeless shelter, meeting with families, making sure that all children are set up for school, making sure there aren't any school problems, specifically sometimes things around free lunch and those kinds of things that they might need to get services through. And if there are any problems, then my job is to work with the school to resolve those problems. Anytime kids have academic issues that may pertain to development that prevent them from being able to succeed academically. And we know that happens a lot due to emotional issues in domestic violence and homeless situations. If we have businesses that are willing to give us tickets to a roller rink, for example, then we can in turn give that to mom and kids, and they can actually spend some family time together doing some things that we often take for granted that we enjoyed as children. And creating that sense of normalcy becomes really important. So I think that is a combination of financial backing as well as community involvement.
Every child wants to have, a new backpack and a new pair of shoes to be able to go back to school with. And that's not a reality for a lot of individuals. So when we do these distributions, we are able to reach a lot of families that might not otherwise be able to have these supplies.
Empowering people to stand up for themselves is very important to me, and that's a big part of my job. And it doesn't seem like it would be that difficult, stand up for yourself, have people respect your boundaries. But people will push you, and sometimes they'll push you in a direction you don't want to go. I go out to most of the high schools in the Tri-Valley area. I visit most freshman health classes. So our mission is all about building a world without violence. And The prevention program facilitates that as far as educating people on what is violence, what does that look like, what's an abusive relationship, what does that look like, and how can I prevent it from happening to me. Sometimes they'll say, now I know what it means, so if I have a girlfriend or if I ever have a boyfriend, I know what to do, or I know how to react in a situation, or I know what not to do. And so that kind of lets me know where they're coming from. I have a passion for what I do, and it's about empowering kids to make good decisions. And the community also plays a role in signing up for my classes. So there's the school end of it, and there's also self-defense classes and things like that. The information I'm giving them could save their life someday.
I was a quality assurance engineer. I took apart semiconductor chips that had failed in the field and found out why they failed. So it was very different. It was a man's world. Everything was very serious and non-emotion, and I considered myself kind of one of the guys, and then I come here and, there's tears at least once a week, and I'm like this emotional person all of a sudden. When I first started 3.5 years ago, I think we were serving maybe 800 a month. Right now, as of last month, we served 3,550. The Tri-Valley Haven Food Pantry, we actually function out of a local church here in Livermore. We rent the space. It's not given to us. The food pantry part, we have 3 rooms. So we do an awful lot in a very limited space. And we are the biggest pantry in Livermore. There are a couple of others, but we are open more hours than all the others combined. So we definitely are the largest, and we see the biggest number of clientele. Over the last 6 months, there has been definitely a different trend in the kind of clientele that we are seeing. We are seeing more of the middle class, more of probably the Caucasian clientele. Before it was more Hispanic, and now we're seeing more Caucasian, more Asian. But, middle-aged people that were kind of hoping to retire and can't now. We're seeing a lot more seniors that were retired and finding that they're not making it anymore. But middle class, for sure, is what we're seeing. Yeah. Wow. I'm a big believer in what you put out there comes back to you. And I have found the more you give out, the more will come back. Every single day, I learn something from my clients, whether it's the children or our clients from the homeless shelter or just one of our regular clients that we see, every couple of weeks. And they share stories with me, and you become involved in these people's lives to a certain extent. And when they walk in here and they look so downtrodden and they've had a bad day, and this is just one more thing that they don't have food on their children's table, and we hand them their food and they turn out the door and they have a smile on their face and they're saying, thank you for giving me food today so I can feed my children. There's nothing better than that. I don't know how to describe what it does to you, but it impacts your life in a way that you can't not do it. For me, it's definitely a passion. I never thought I would say that, but there's no way I could do something different. There's no way I could go back to Silicon Valley after this. This job kind of pulls you in, and every single day you learn something. Every day you have an emotional experience that changes you for the better, always.
Our holiday program is a really big event that we give every year to the community. Many people don't know that we do this, but we actually provide a shopping experience for low-income families for Christmas. And what we do is we bring all the donations we can together for Christmas time and basically provide a 15-minute shopping spree for every family that signs up. And they can pick a gift out for every person in their family.
The Tri-Valley Haven mission is centered around creating homes safe from abuse, and our domestic violence program is, centered also around that idea. We have the hotline, which people are able to get immediate feedback, immediate support and information. For women that choose to come into shelter, again, we are helping them equip themselves with the tools necessary so that when they leave, they can build their own home that's free from abuse and safe from violence.
You never get a machine when you call our number. You always get a live person, not an answering service. We're very committed that way to our roots of that 24-hour live person response. So when someone's scared, when someone's hurting, they will hear a live person say, "Are you okay?" And very often, of course, she's not. And then the work begins. When I go to sleep at night, some of my worst fears about the world and peace on earth and people getting hurt unnecessarily, I know I'm doing my best to change that. And that I work with people who every day do their best to change that and help people heal from that. That feels pretty good. So we talk about peace and safety, but what it really comes down to, we want people to thrive, of course, but we want them to live. Women are getting killed by batters, and we want that to stop.
The Tri-Valley Haven's commitment to the area's continued revitalization will allow the organization to provide more services that ultimately help maintain the standards that make this area a wonderful place to live, visit, work, and play. Together, we build a world without violence. Thank you for joining us.